Hello, welcome to another weekly update. And the Microsoft Build Week just happened. So, Microsoft Build, Microsoft Developers Conference, the second time it's happened virtually. It's kind of definitely feels this time around, though, that Microsoft have really thought about the fact that it's a virtual conference. And it's kind of interesting because if you look at the commentary in the kind of tech news and things like that, there's a lot of focus on the next version of Windows, even though that was a kind of throwaway half a sentence from Satcher in the keynote, and there's really no new information at all other than something is coming, which I think we sort of knew anyway. I think in general, looking at the conference, there are new announcements. There's not lots of new announcements, and I think in a way that's fair. We've just had Ignite back end of the year. Obviously, we've had the Christmas period. The world is also distracted. I think it's fair. I wasn't expecting lots of things going into this. There are some new things to talk about, and actually, that's what this entire weekly update is all about. New things that have come from Build, and I deliberately haven't looked at any other news, and we'll focus on that next week. This week is all about Build announcements, and the Build announcements that I thought were interesting that I want to bring your attention to. So we can go into those. So the first of which is a new developer portal for Microsoft Teams. So this is kind of interesting. So ever since launch, we've had Teams, and we've had the Teams you can access on the web at teams.microsoft.com. Alongside of that, there's been the Teams Admin Center, and that's been at admin.teams.microsoft.com, and that kind of follows the pattern, if you like, for Office 365 administration, which has been admin.microsoft.com. There is now a new subdomain specifically for developers, which is dev.teams.microsoft.com. So DEV, dev.teams.microsoft.com, to go alongside the admin.teams.microsoft.com. And this is the developer portal. In terms of functionality, this replaces App Studio and is the place you can now go to manage your apps, to create new apps, to have a look at how adaptive cards look and build out adaptive cards, and also to get access to some of the new design templates, including the new ones that I'm going to talk about in a minute, actually, as well as some Teams UI kits and sample apps. These are all things, if you kind of follow my blog and listen to these updates before, you'll have heard me talk about all of these. They've all come out in the sort of past couple of months. The UI kit and the sample app I've talked about before. This is collating them all into one place. It's kind of interesting in a way that it replaces App Studio. The thing I liked about App Studio was that it was a Microsoft Teams app, so it felt right to have a Microsoft Teams app being used to promote and help developers build more Microsoft Teams apps. It does feel slightly strange having a web portal to be that place instead. I kind of get it. I guess it makes sense. It makes it easier to access in some ways for some people. Maybe there's better support across different devices and environments and things. So, it's an interesting choice in a way. That's the choice. And I guess you could also make a solid argument: why is the Teams Admin Center not a Teams app? Why does it have to be a web page? So, anyway. It is a web page, is what it is. Dev.teams.microsoft.com is the new place for developers to go to build out Teams apps. Also, where you go to configure your existing apps, distribute them, manage them, all of those things. So put that in your favorites. And that's a kind of big announcement from Build, this new portal. Oh, it's also going to be where you can create custom scenes for meetings. So this was talked about. I don't think it's available yet. And this allows you to create together mode scenes. So you can create one for your organization or whatever you want, really. And you do that from that same developer portal as well. So, that's a kind of big one. And obviously affects all Teams developers kind of quite a lot, because instead of going to App Studio, you'll now go to this new web page instead. Okay, other things. There's an update to the Teams Toolkit. So I've talked about the Teams Toolkit before. It's for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. It's good scaffolding to get started, or just start creating your if you need a new Teams application for something, this is great scaffolding to get started doing that. There is now let me show you. There is now a new toolkit for doing that. For certainly right now, it only looks like it's available for Visual Studio Code. Previously, the previous version was also available on Visual Studio, so I'm guessing that if it's not there already, the new version, this 2.0, will also come to Visual Studio as well. There's some extra fun things, better integration with Azure and SharePoint are kind of the biggies, I guess, and some more scaffolding around authentication and identity. So that's all good. I'll put links in the blog post to make sure you can get up to date with it. So if you use the toolkit today, you'll probably want to get this. It's the latest. It's got bug fixes in it as well. It's got some new stuff in it as well. So not going to kind of go over old ground too much. It's just, updated toolkit. Excellent news. Okay, let's look at something else. There are some new APIs coming for meetings, but not yet. So this was kind of one of those announcements, and there've been quite a few of these across. If you look across the announcement, not just at Teams and what's been happening in Teams development, but if you look across build, there have been quite a few announcements that we are doing this and it's not ready, but it's coming soon. This is one of those. There are going to be some new APIs around how you work with meetings. So if you remember at the last Ignite, there were new APIs for dealing about creating apps in meetings. So in meeting apps that allow you to paint canvases like web page kind of content into meetings, basically a surface inside a meeting in order to display content. This is kind of building on that a bit. There'll be more API support to basically know when meetings are happening. So you'll be able to know about kind of the start and end time of meetings. That's good because it means that you can maybe get a bot into the meeting if you need to, or you can kick off some other automation about the meeting. You know when meetings wrap up, so you can kind of take action on that as well. And you can kind of imagine like a bot picking up and saying, right, the meeting's ended, so here are the actions. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to do. So this is kind of not loads and loads of detail about this at the moment, other than Microsoft saying they're working on something and it's coming. No clear timelines about when it's coming and no real detail about exactly what it's going to be. So we'll kind of wait for that, but just be aware that there are some more meetings APIs coming. And it's kind of good as well, I guess, to just get that validation that Microsoft are still working, on making the Teams platform better for developers, filling in those gaps, listening to what developers are saying about what's missing and where the gaps are and where they could really build solutions if they just had the API to do that or this or that or whatever. They are listening to that and iterating on it. So that's good news as well. Other things. This is an interesting one. I'm going to share my screen for this one. So if you write messaging extensions for Teams, they will soon work in Outlook. So that's exciting. Really exciting, because without seemingly much work, you can be the messaging extensions that you write for Teams will also be accessed by people in Outlook, which is great because lots and lots of people still spend lots and lots of time in Outlook, and that's fine. There's lots of places where you could imagine a messaging extension being really useful in Outlook when you're composing a message. In the same way that when you're composing a message in Teams, it's very useful. You can completely imagine how, you'd want to be able to look up some information from a CRM system and drop in an adaptive card. That would be really, really useful to be able to do in an email, especially if it's a nice adaptive card that looks nicely formatted in exactly the same way that it is in Teams. So this is really good. This is great to see. This is kind of, in a way, I think we're starting to see some of the fruits of the work that's been done in the Outlook team around kind of moving to a more common UI fabric, kind of sort of, I don't mean fabric in the capital F sense. There's too many code names. I meant just more kind of a web-based commonality around the UI and the parts of the UI that are shared amongst different clients. And it turns out that there's a good interop there between that and Teams and how Teams works. So apparently makes it not impossible to surface messaging extensions that are from Teams in Outlook. Again, no real detail about the timings on this or exactly what it's going to look like, or a big one for me actually, no clear detail on whether they're just going to work or whether developers are going to have to put some work in, whether it's an opt-in system where you update your manifest to say this is a messaging extension that makes sense to work in Outlook as well. I don't really understand how you add them into Outlook, so there's lots and lots of things we don't yet know, but this is kind of an announcement that Microsoft are looking to make this happen. So it's a kind of watch this space kind of announcement. Something that is not a watch this space announcement is something that you can do today is build cards in Microsoft Viva. So Viva Connections. So so this was also announced to build, and it comes as part of the SharePoint framework because there's an update to the SharePoint framework. So SPFX 1.13 is the latest version, and you can either completely do it yourself or you can use their provided scaffolding, and you can build community dashboards, you can build news feeds, and some other resources as well, which is kind of cool. Right now, it's just a private preview, so then it's kind of not open to everyone. It's not GA, certainly. You can sign up for the private preview. I've put a link in my blog post about it, so you can go and find that. Let me show you what it's called. So it's called Developers Can Build Microsoft Viva Connection cards. And here's a nice screenshot of what it can look like. Some new content that's been put into here. You can see it nice on mobile and on desktop, and showing up in connections. So yeah, you can sign up for the private preview of that if that sounds interesting. Okay, other things. So this is kind of what I meant by build, right? There's lots of announcements still. There's lots going on. I'm just kind of plowing through them because there's lots and lots of things to get through. And like I say, some are here, some are not here. So yep, this is a big one. And it is here now apparently, although it's only in private preview, but it's kind of a really big one to hear Microsoft say this is in private preview. This is the Fluid framework, and the Fluid framework in Microsoft Teams. So specifically in chat, really interesting. So if you haven't been paying attention to kind of what Fluid is, it's this kind of abstraction to maintain a shared state. So I like to think of it the way I like to think of it as kind of like SignalR, but with a bit of UI engine on top. So if you've got a client and you make some UI change, some client-based UI change, that sort of gets sequenced, if you like, into messages. Those messages get synced up via something like SignalR. I don't think it is SignalR, but like you get the concept, right? Something like SignalR gets picked up by another client that's subscribed, and then kind of replays that client UI change. So everybody gets synced up for UI changes, which is really good for collaboration. You can imagine like this image on the screen that's kind of playing through this animation. You could kind of see how people can collaborate in real time on something like sticky notes. Really nice. So this is coming to chat. So I don't know what that looks like. I guess you'll be able to have real-time collaboration on chat messages, so like bullet lists, bullet points, tables as you fill them out, that sort of thing, which sounds both amazing and also like a fight. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how that's managed in the UI. But yeah, it's not something you're going to see in your Teams client right now, but it is happening. And there is a private preview program for it, so it's real. There's no, I don't think... what am I trying to say? There is not, I don't think, a sign up for the private preview. So I don't think it's like an open private. Some private previews you can just kind of apply to and get in. This is more of it's private preview. We're making it quite hard to get in, I think. That's kind of how I see it. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I haven't found a sign up link. If I do, if you see one, let me know. I'll share it, etc., etc. But yeah, for right now, this is really good to see that Fluid is coming and is real and is already inside Microsoft Teams, and we'll see it show up in Microsoft Teams chat. So great news there. It'll be interesting to see kind of how that works for developers, because I guess conceptually there's no reason why developers can't build this into their app today. Fluid is not a Microsoft Teams thing. It's a Microsoft thing being worked on elsewhere in Microsoft, and you can just go and download the bits and start using it today. So you could build apps, I guess, and I don't know, I haven't tried this. I guess they would probably work inside Microsoft Teams anyway. This is the Microsoft Teams team building it into the product. There's actually no reason why developers couldn't use it today, I don't think, in their own applications. Okay, so just three more things to talk about. So this is an interesting one, actually, and maybe I should have led this with this one because it's kind of it's quite impacting. So, well, it's impacting if you use Data Connect for Microsoft Graph. So Data Connect is how you get large amounts of data out of Microsoft Graph, and it connects into Data Factory. So So instead of like making a graph call for everything that you want in your tenant, every single item, and chasing them all up and then getting them again next week just to make sure nothing's changed, you can pipe bulk amounts of data to Azure Data Factory and then from there into your application. This has been around for a while. It's been I think 2018 it was launched into public preview. So it's been around, it's been a thing, but as of now, Microsoft are going to start charging you for it. So let's just be kind of clear about what that means. So up until this point, you've still had to pay because you've paid for the compute cost. So you set it up to Data Factory incurs a cost when it runs. Anything you then do with that data is going to incur a cost because you're using it, whatever it is you're doing, ingress, egress, all the rest of it. That's always been true. Like you've always paid for the Azure compute cost. This is on top of that, and it's a per item charge that Microsoft are adding for kind of using Data Connect to kind of cover their costs of extracting it out of Graph and giving it to you. So this is interesting. I think it's the first time that I know of really that Microsoft are charging consumers access to their own data, albeit in a kind of packaged format. It comes out of your Azure credits. The cost is $0.375 per 1,000 objects. And an object is a single item of data. So like one email, one file, one message, that is one object. So actually these objects kind of accrue quite fast. So let me show you, sorry. Let me do I've done a kind of what's the cost example. And let's say you've got 500 mailboxes, each with 1,000 mail items, kind of rate fairly typical maybe. That gives you 500,000 items. So the cost after you work it out for that is just under $200 to extract that data. Now the challenge is if you want to keep that data up to date, you probably have to do that every month or even every week. So you're incurring that cost every time. That makes it quite expensive if you're doing it regularly, obviously. And the other kind of thing that's interesting is that there's no deduping that happens as part of that. So if you want to do deduping, because you can imagine, especially emails, you get lots and lots of copies of the same email if they get sent to lots of people, you will end up paying for those copies because they're all in different mailboxes. So as the data comes down, you're going to pay for it, even if the first thing you do is then dedupe it again. So if you use Data Connect today, you 100% need to be aware of this. You need to go and check out all sorts of things. You need to go and check out the blog post. You need to check out the frequently asked questions. You need to check out the costs and kind of make sure you're happy. If you don't use Data Connect, you can safely ignore this, other than I hope, I have no inside knowledge, but I kind of hope this is not a direction of travel for how Microsoft Graph evolves. I think it would be I think it would harm developers and the kind of developer community if Microsoft charged across the board for graph access. I don't think they will, just to be clear. But it's kind of interesting to see them doing it at all. And it might just be because nobody uses Data Connect. It might just be that, usage of Data Connect is really low and it costs Microsoft quite a lot of money to look after. And so they are adding a subscription to that for those people that really need it and are willing to pay for it, and everybody else will not use it because of the cost. And that's fine. We'll see how that goes. But I thought that was really interesting and worth calling out. All right, let's move away slightly from Teams development, because we've talked Teams development for a really long time. And let's look at Azure Communication Services, the other thing I'm sort of super interested in at the moment. And that has also added some new features. And so some are now and some are coming up. So things like call recording is coming soon, next month. Wind back a bit on that. That's full kind of just like it is in Teams call recording, but your client will be able to do it. You'll be able to do it either server side. There's special server side code to do it. You'll get the full recording. It's not like the Cloud Communications API that just gives you snippets. You'll be able to get the full MP4 recording. They're planning on doing MP3 support as well, so you can just get the audio. So that's really interesting because you'll get, obviously, like I say, the full video, but also in code. So you'll be able to sequence it, you'll be able to process it in code and all the rest of it. So super exciting. Direct routing is available next month in preview as well. I've got no information there on what that means in terms of geography or any other features, but we'll see. The UI library, so I've been talking about the UI library for a little bit because it's been in a private preview, so I've known it exists. So they're now talking about this. There are components, base and composite components you can use. That's available now, which is great. There's a new client SDK as well. Weirdly, only for UWP apps, which sounded odd to me when I heard it, but thinking about it, like UWP is used by things like HoloLens, Surface, and Xbox, so it sort of makes sense for developers building those solutions that need communications, so kind of does totally make sense. And then also Turn support is available in preview, which is really interesting because that means that Azure Communication Services will be able to work really well with other WebRTC solutions. So, if you've already got communication as a service and you're trying to add to it with something that's in Azure Communication Services you really want, it's kind of good to know you'll be able to kind of interop with other WebRTC solutions as well using this. So that's in preview at the moment. That's kind of really interesting as well. So another example actually of how Microsoft are evolving and are adding new features to these things. Even though sometimes it feels like nothing's happening, actually under the hood, lots of things are happening, are being added. It just, this stuff takes time. Yeah, so lots going on for Azure Communication Services as well, which is really good to see. Oh, and then finally, I'm just going to leave you with this because it's kind of nothing to do with Teams or Azure Communication Services, but I saw it as part of the announcements to build and I thought it was cool, and I am already using this, which is Quake Mode for Windows Terminal 1.9. So lots of other terminals have Quake Mode. A lot of the Unix one or Linux ones have Quake Mode. It's the thing where the terminal drops down from the top of the screen. So wherever you are, whatever application you're in, if you quickly need a terminal, it's a hotkey that brings the terminal down from the top of the screen, so you can make one or two commands and then make it go away again. If you are old like me, then you will instantly know why it's called Quake Mode. But if you want an explanation, so Quake is a fantastic game by ID Software. I don't know how old it is. I don't know, mid-90s, late 90s maybe. And it had a pull-down terminal. So you'd be playing the game and you could pull down a terminal and make some changes if you knew all the commands for them. So you could kind of change the brightness. You could, I can't remember what else you did. I used it mostly for putting the cheat codes in for things like God mode and like no damage and all that sort of stuff. That's what I used it for. And it also had, I think it told you things as well. So like it was almost like a log file. So it would tell you, you've got the grenade launcher or whatever as you picked it up. So yeah, it was really cool. And I think you could change all the settings in there as well. And yeah, it was just kind of a good peek under the hood of how the game was working. So that's why it's called Quake Mode. Yeah, so it's coming to Windows Terminal. In fact, you can get this now. I've done it now. Oh, I wonder if I can show you actually. This may or may not work. So you can see my screen and you can see my blog post about Quake Mode. So the shortcut key that gets used is the tilde. So it always used to be the tilde in Quake. It was the tilde, which is the one top left of your keyboard. It's actually Windows key and tilde. And there you go. So it brings it down. You see that? It brings it down from the top of the screen, which is kind of really neat, actually, because you can be working on something. And I guess probably it just works. Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Sorry. Yeah, so you can be working on something and be like, oh, I really need a command line. And you go, and go, and, bring it up. And then you can do whatever it is you want to do. And then make it go away again, just with the same tilde key. So I really like it. I think it's kind of cool. I've already started using it, which kind of surprised me because I've got old fingers and I thought the kind of muscle memory of Windows key R, CMD, enter was kind of really baked into me for like quickly get a command screen up and running. But actually, I've switched to using this almost without thinking about it, which is a good sign of something that's going to be sticky and stay. So, yep, you can get this today but you need Windows Terminal 1.9. It's in the store, so you can go and get it. You have to go and look for the preview version of Windows Terminal, though, not there's two in the store. One's the preview one and one's the normal one. So if you go and find the preview one and install that, you can install it alongside the GA one and just play with it. I found it really stable. I've had no problems with it, but whatever. Yeah, so that's fun and interesting and maybe even useful. Well, that was a whole load of stuff. lots going on at Build, and I didn't even really cover lots of the .NET stuff. So there's plenty you should go and watch. Actually, go and watch the Scott Hanselman Day 2 keynote. It's a lot of fun and covers some really interesting things, including GitHub code spaces, which I'm really excited about, but I haven't had any time to write about or really talk about or anything. I want to try them basically and then kind of write them up, I think, if it's interesting enough. But I mean, lots of other people will be writing up about GitHub code spaces, so I might not bother. But it looks really, really good, really powerful actually, as a way of quickly running code without worrying about loads and loads of dependencies. And especially if you're flipping between machines as well, between locations, which I think we all might be for a while, for the next kind of period of time. So yeah, that was really good to see actually. So that's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to playing with that quite a lot. And there's lots of other things that got talked about as well, not to take away from any of the other announcements. So lots happening at Build. Kind of lots and not lots, if that makes sense. I don't know. I think if you dig if you kind of peel it back a bit, there are lots of things happening for developers, which makes sense. It's a developer conference, right? So I think there's always tried to be crossover at these big events. The big ones like Build and Ignite, they've always tried to throw concessions to the secondary participants, if that makes sense. So like Ignite is very much an IT pro show, and Build is very much a developer show, but I think they've always tried to make concessions to the other people as well, and that has happened less this time around maybe. So there's lots of developer focused stuff, which is what you'd expect, but there isn't maybe so much other stuff. And lots of the developer stuff is very focused on where Microsoft think developers should be as well. It's quite prescriptive this time around in a funny sort of way. It's very focused on cloud development, which is, Microsoft make kind of no bones about saying it's the future. That's not where everybody is, let's say, which is fine. It's just obviously if you're not in that place, you might look through this and think, there's not much for me, which is fine, because actually, also as that happens, things do kind of slow down a little bit, and new things come less often, and for some people that's really good, because you got that stability as well. So yeah, lots to look at for Build, I'm still working my way through the session catalog, lots to watch, but yeah, it was a good event, I think. Like I say, lots of things that happened, but lots of things also are coming soon. So it was a kind of split between here are things you can do now, but also here's what we're thinking and here's what we're going to be iterating on. And I guess we'll come back for Ignite and kind of see some of those things in action once they're done. All right, I think that's everything from me. Went on a bit long, so sorry about that. But I hope it's been useful, and I hope you have a good rest of your weekend. This one is out a bit late this weekend, so apologies for that. But yeah, have a great one, and whatever it is you're doing, I will see you again next time.